Welcome to R23D, my name is Alan, and in this week's video I'll be painting this marvellous sculpture of Cammy from Street Fighter by Bulkamancer Studios. If you haven't checked out Bulkamancer yet, you really should. Their sculpts are incredible. Just to be clear, I'm not sponsored by them, these are personal projects I paid for myself. Everything was printed on my Uniformation GK3 Ultra using Funkricol standard resins. I used the pre-supports from Bulkamancer as they're exceptionally well engineered and they always break away cleanly with minimal post-processing. I organised the prints across two plates, one for Cammy's body parts and the second for the base. The parts came out pristine after a quick swim in the deep fat fryer that is my ultrasonic cleaner. I did a quick test assembly and realised that gluing the legs was probably going to be the best way to go about getting a seamless look after painting. So with that in mind, I prepped the remaining parts and set the magnets into the arms and headed straight to the priming stage. I must admit I'm really impressed with the finish from Kaleido's black primer. It's excellent for smoothing over any lingering blemishes and creates a perfect dark base for the white Zenithal layer that comes next. I started the fire hydrant with several thin coats of Vallejo's Flesh Blood Red from a higher angle, and then deepened the shadows from a low angle with Vallejo's Gory Red. Picked out the metal of the chains with Proacryl's Bronze as a really nice colour, and I kept the pressure dial consistent by base coating it with Vallejo's Flesh Blood Red. I kinda knew I would regret gluing those legs on this early. She ended up being a bit too big for the spray booth, which made painting quite a challenge. I had to improvise a bit, but I still managed to get the Kaleido white primer down for a nice Zenithal highlight. And so once I gave all the other parts that needed a Zenithal highlight their highlights, I moved on to the base. I started the base by coating the bricks with a layer of Vallejo's Tire Black, and then I dry brushed the dirt underneath with Proacryl Black Brown. And I then followed that up by texturing the bricks with a microfiber cloth to stipple on a nearly dry coat of Army Painter's Ash Grey followed by Deep Grey. And I added some depth to the bricks with a light application of transparent black, which really helps break up the sort of monotone look of them. I then tackled the underground pipes with a single coat of Fresh Blood Red, keeping it to one layer to make them look nice and dark compared to the rest of the pipes. I picked out some of the brick edges with Ash Grey for a bit of extra pop, and then moved on to the weathering stage. I used Vallejo steel to add some worn chip details to the pipes and to the hydrant, and it really helps them look used and abused. And I'm being quite selective with the edge weathering. By focusing only on key wear points, I can maintain the realistic look without overdoing it. I printed the water effects using Anycubic clear resin and then gave them an initial coat of Vallejo gloss varnish before giving them a small tint of Citadel Pterodon turquoise in just selected areas, and then finished it off with another coat of Vallejo gloss varnish. And I didn't want the base to distract from Cammy, so I kept it pretty straightforward and went with a sleek Vallejo gloss black for the bottom ring. Starting on Cammy's skin tones next, I used Vallejo Squid Pink as a highlight from above to undercoat the head, body and hands. This is a great way to add some warmth underneath the thin skin tone layers that are coming next. And although our arms are secure with magnets, I chose to keep them attached during painting to ensure a uniform application of the colour across the entire model. And to really make those muscles pop, I worked some Proacryl Transparent Red into the shadows. It's a great way to add depth and to help define the muscle tone across our body. Airbrush acting up? If you end up splattering a dark colour where it doesn't belong, like I did on Cammy's face, just hit it again with your original highlight colour from above. A quick coat of Squid Pink brought those highlights back to life again. For my first skin tone layer, I applied Army Painter's Agate Skin from a high angle. By working in thin gradual passes, I was able to build up the base tone whilst preserving the depth and definition I established earlier with the pink and red passes. To push the highlights further, I applied Vallejo's Salmon Rose into the most prominent areas of her skin to help define the muscle structure. For the final highlight, I applied the Army Painter's Pearl Skin to the highest points of her skin. This bright pale pink provides a sharp spotlight effect that really enhances the model's overall depth. For the final shadows, I broke out the ever popular Orcish Dermis. I used really thin passes so I wouldn't lose that pale fair skin tone, but it adds just the right amount of darker pink to ground the shadows. Finally, I sealed the skin tones with an overall pass of Vallejo's satin varnish. This provides a durable protective layer whilst adding a subtle lifelike sheen to her complexion. And for her berry and gloved forearms, I went with Citadel's Bal Red. I love the finish of this contrast paint. It gives a perfect finish for that bright, punchy colour that Cammy needs. For the deep shadows of the red bits, I went back in with Gory Red by Vallejo. I just targeted the downward facing surfaces with the airbrush. It's a quick way to add some punchy contrast without losing the base colour. For the main part of Cammy's outfit, I mixed up a 50-50 blend of Army Painter Greenskin and Vallejo Splinter Green. I thinned it out a bit with water, which helped it flow perfectly and gave me a super smooth finish. And for her boots, I wanted them to look properly worn, so I used a super thinned wash of Vallejo's Hull Red and RLM 61 Dark Brown. I let the pigment settle into the recesses and it did all the hard work for me. It gave the boots such a great weathered look. I used the Hull Red again on its own, this time for the trim on her hat, and then added the badge with a little application of Decacolour Gold, which is my favourite gold colour. Painted Cammy's fingertips with Vallejo's Salmon Rose and then gave the upper surfaces a quick dab with Army Paint's Pearl Skin. And then I painted all the straps and buckles on Cammy's outfit with Vallejo Tire Black to give them a nice contrast to the rest of the green on her outfit. For that leg bag, I went with Army Paint's Deep Grey and used black for the buckles and straps to make them stand out a bit more. I also added some extra contrast to the outfit by carefully applying Nuln Oil by Citadel to the shadowy spots on her chest, underarms and on her back. I used the airbrush freehand to target the areas I wanted to make darker. A couple of quick controlled passes really helped build up those shadows just the way I wanted. Returning to her boots, I painted the socks with Vallejo Fresh Blood Red. I then picked out the laces and thinned the black paint with a little bit of water to ensure a smooth flow over the fine detail. Finally, I finished the soles with Tire Black, a dark grey that actually provides a more realistic scaled down appearance than pure black. For the intricate detail on the pressure gauge, I started off by painting the face dial with Army Paint's Brain Matter Beige, as it covers better than plain white by Vallejo. I then painted the contrast yellow with Citadel's Phalanx Yellow Air for one half of the dial, and the lovely Bal Red for the other side, also by Citadel. I then carefully painted the dial details with a slightly thinned down Vallejo black and the thinnest paintbrush I have, and also the strongest magnifying glasses I have. And I sped this part of the footage up as this took me quite a while to paint. To top off the pressure gauge, I used some clear high gloss UV resin. I pushed it into place to cover the dial with a piece of wood and then hit it with a UV pen to harden it. It looks so smooth and glassy when it's finished that it was definitely worth the effort. I used thin applications of Orchis Dermis to blush her cheeks, applying the same shade to her upper eye area to provide some contour. I find this stage particularly challenging as it's maintaining precise control over the spray pattern and placement that I find difficult. For her eyebrows, I used a slightly thin blend of Army Painter's Ash Grey and Deep Grey. Since they are well sculpted, the challenge is simply to maintain precision and avoid straying onto her forehead. You can sometimes use a side loading technique where you put the paint on the side rather than the tip of the brush, but for this one that I'm using, it's so thin that I just use a very fine application of it. And I painted in the eye area and the eyelashes with the same colour. I then moved on to her lips, which was a combination of German Orange and Bloody Red, both by Vallejo. I filled in the detail and then used a slightly lighter shade to highlight just certain parts of her lips. For the whites of her eyes, I used Army Painter's Brain Matter Beige. It's an off-white shade that's a staple in my collection. I find it incredibly versatile. It's my go-to for everything from underpaint and highlights to providing base coverage for darker colours, and also for painting in eye whites. For her irises, I used UK Azure Blue. To simulate the natural light, I applied a highlight of the base colour mixed with white to the lower half of the iris. I completed the effect by dotting a black pupil in the centre and placing two white specular highlights, one primary and one secondary, to the iris, and to add depth and realism. It's another one where a steady hand and a good depth perception comes in handy. Well, 1 out of 2 is not bad. And to finish off the paint effects on her face, I applied Kaleido's gloss varnish to her eyes and to her lips, just to make them look a bit more natural. So I wasn't satisfied with the initial hair colour as it looked just a bit too dark for my liking, so I resprayed it with a blend of Citadel's Phalanx Yellow and Vallejo Sunset Orange until I achieved the desired blonde tone I was looking for. Finally, I added some depth back into it with a wash of Citadel's Reikland Flesh Shade, and I allowed that to settle into the recesses. Next, I painted the hairbands on her ponytails using Citadel's Bal Red. This paint provides an excellent coverage and it makes the colours really pop. Finally, I gave the manhole cover, which the cat is clinging to, a shadow pass. I used Black Legion by Citadel to deepen the areas directly underneath where the cat's front legs will be. And speaking of the cat, I began with a primer black base coat and then built the upper surfaces up using Vallejo Tire Black for a slightly more grey look. For the fur texture, I added a highlight of Army Paint's Deep Grey, and finally, to create a nice bright focal point on the cat's face, I sprayed a T-shape very carefully using Brigade Grey across the centre and up the bridge of its nose. To achieve the vibrant green I wanted for the cat's eyes, I started with a base coat of Brain Matter Beige, and whilst that dried, I painted the cat's nose with Vallejo's German Orange, which is actually a really lovely muted dark pink. Once the base was set, I applied a layer of Let's Resin's Iridescent Emerald Green to give the eyes a brilliant shine, and then I finished them using the same technique as Cammy's, adding a dark pupil, a white specular highlight and a coat of gloss varnish to really bring them to life. I realised later on that Cammy's badge was actually the wrong colour, so I repainted it with Bal Red and then added some contrast to the pattern part of her outfit with Citadel's Creed Camo Green. The only thing left was to paint her totally unnecessary camo stripes on her legs with intermediate green from Vallejo, and she's done! Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of this video. I had a blast painting this character and I think Bulkamancer did an incredible job with this design. Also, if you want to be one of the cool kids and get an early look into my upcoming projects, get behind the scenes updates and download exclusive parts that I've created, head over to my Patreon page now. I'd love to hear from you who your all-time favourite Street character fighter was, so why don't you let me know in the comment bit below, and don't forget to land a punch on that subscribe button so you get notified of the next video. So until next time, this has been R2-3D and I'll see you in the next one.
Fight!